From Counter-Strike 1.6, an area of CSGO that I found very underwhelming when I initially moved over to the game, and still to this day bothers me and has never sat right with me, is the inaccuracy on no-scopes with the AWP. Now, first things first, when we say no-scope, there will always be that guy who comes along and says, actually, a no-scope is where you don't use the scope at all. You mean a quick scope, where you press the scope button, but you do not see the scope, and you fire. That is called a quick scope. Yes, in the most pedantic possible definition of the terminology, that is a quick scope, and that would be a no-scope. The point is, nobody uses no-scopes because of how ridiculously inaccurate they are, as in actually not using the scope at all. And from literally over a decade ago, we're talking like, in fact, almost since the beginning of the game, the actual colloquial way to call what you call a quick scope has been no scope, because we're still trying to fire with some accuracy. So people have always done that. Therefore, what you call quick scope has actually in 99% of cases been called a no scope. Therefore, that's now just what a no scope is known to be, because it is still firing a shot that you see no scope on, even though you use a scope. And so that's just a terminology of what it means. And you're not going to turn around that momentum and fucking make that massive steamship do a 90-degree turn by just posting that on Reddit forums. So we're going to stick with that terminology. No scoping is actually just when you fire without seeing the scope, even though obviously you use the scope, or fire immediately while the weapon's scoping itself back in, which is essentially the same thing, and a technique that also was invented in 1.6. So one of the problems with the no scoping, I think, is first and foremost that at close range, it's actually like close enough in terms of like not that much inaccuracy that if you're legitimately properly close range, you're going to get the kill in like a solid 90% of cases, I'd say. I'd say 90% sounds about right. The issue becomes that when you're even at any sort of distance, like if you're getting even close to mid-range, suddenly it becomes too inaccurate for pro-level play. Like you will see shots that you completely miss the character. Even if you tried to put it right dead in the center of the most meaty part of the character, right, just like in the torso, chest area, right in the very center, it can still wildly whiff and miss his arms completely and just not hit the body completely. Now, the problem is, at the pro level, that's where we need it to hit. Now, it is the case that it used to actually hit at all ranges accurately. Like you could do super long range no scopes if you really got like the very center of your screen on there. Famously, some people at home, as a way to like cheat that, would put a dot on their screen, like put a Sharpie point on their screen. Now, most really good players don't need that. They kind of like sense where the screen is anyway, and they really good AWPers would know where the screen is as it is anyway, the center of the screen, and so they could aim that point without needing a dot there, and you wouldn't need that help in that sense. And obviously, to even aim it on people, it's not that easy even if you have a dot on the screen. It is super long range, remember, you're trying to hit pixels, basically. Not literally, but in gaming terminology, vernacular. So, one of the issues here is, when you see a play like Simple's 1v2 against Fnatic, I'll link a video of it up there, when he was against Crims, no, who was the first guy? I forget who the first, Dennis, I think it was, Dennis and Olaf Meister, in a 1v2 at ESL 1 Cologne in the semi-final on Cash, the second map, and he drops down from, I mean, I'm not even sure you call it on Cash, actually. Do you call it Heaven on Cash? I don't know. The upper area in the B site, he drops down, and he actually hits the no-scope in mid-air onto the first guy, but very close range. And then the second guy, which is Olaf Meister, is over towards the main part coming in, and he just no-scopes that guy as well right afterwards. Now, I spoke to Simple the day after that actual no-scope, and I talked to him about that sequence, and he said, yeah, the second shot, I mean, that's bullshit. Like, even if you hit that in matchmaking, you know, like, that's not legit. Like, you can't have 100% aimed that. Like, you don't know whether that's going to hit or not. And so, even he acknowledges, like, what was an incredible play and should be, and remembers one of the epic plays, you can't put it down 100% to skill. Now, you could to a degree. Like, if you look where he put the crosshair and then put the screen, yeah, he put it onto him and in that area. Therefore, he probably did aim, and he was just lucky that it went within that area by the random chance. But it also could have just veered off completely. And if you ever look at the size of the box, like Olaf Meister would be like this big inside the box, basically. So he could easily have hit like up here in this top right hand corner with that same aimed shot, missed completely, and then probably doesn't get the kill, doesn't get the amazing sequence, despite the fact he's put the crosshair onto the guy. Not literally the crosshair, because you don't have the crosshair with the AWP, it's not scoped in, obviously. But you know what I mean? Put the center of the screen where the crosshair would be onto the guy. So This is an issue to me because I want the best players in the world. And by the way, mostly only the best players in the world would hit these with any kind of consistency to be able to get these incredible shots and be rewarded for actually doing it. Not have to pray to some RNGesus that the shot hits within this massive square. And also for us to not have to worry when it's a shot like that, at medium range to slightly longer range, to have to think, oh, there's probably luck involved with that. We can't really know if he even really hit it. I mean, the worst part about that kind of an accuracy is in this scenario, he's actually aiming at him and it just happens to hit there. But because of the size of the box, some other fucker at the pro level who's bad, I mean, just for a joke, I'll say Smith, shall I? He could actually try and aim and totally miss the guy, and the guy could be here, and his crosshair could be over here, but he could actually hit the very edge of that box and still kill the guy, and he would get the no-scope kill, whereas Simple could be on him, and it could go to the side of the box, and he could miss the kill. How does that make any sense? That's ridiculous, right? So, one of the points with this is that because it used to be even more accurate, and by the way, the inaccuracy, because it exists even at close range, means it's not like totally on. Well, at close range especially, if you were really, really good, I'm talking like a top 5 AWP in the world, you really could routinely hit those no-scopes and make people fear rushing you down. So a good example, in the latter days of 1.6, go look from like 2010 onwards, and you'll see how incredibly good Delpan was. One of those slow style AWPers, really super good long range AWPer, but if you bum rushed him down with 2 or 3 guys, especially if you had pistols or something, he's going to hit 1 or 2 of those no-scopes, and he really can take you out. So you can't just rush him, you can't just close the distance like you're supposed to against most AWPers. He's so good, he can also withstand that, and it makes the AWP, as a result, more powerful weapon, more versatile, and not as easy to counter. Now, I'm sure some Valve people, if you brought this topic up to them, will claim like, oh, but the weapon's not supposed to be used that way. It's supposed to be used scope. It's supposed to be a long range. It's supposed to be used scoped in long range. You know, you're only supposed to be able to hit a no scope really close range. Even though I don't think that's how they programmed the game. I think that's just what they would claim and reverse engineer now as an excuse. But first of all, it's not like you'll see people doing these long range scopes that'll be really accurate and hitting them and killing people all the time. Most people will not do that instead of doing a scoped shot because it's still very hard without a scope to aim onto a tiny little guy right down the bottom of long A. You're not going to do that in 99% of the cases. You're only going to do that in panic shots, and panic shots are not going to be super well aimed, so you're going to miss most of them. You didn't see tons of long-range shots like that in 1.6 where it was accurate. The kind of people who did that, like for example Pond Filler, I'll put a movie up there if I can find one of his movies, he used to purposely do it, and actually I happen to know he wasn't that good on LAN, and famously half the clips in those movies are because he just tried to play that ridiculous long-range no-scoping style just to make the movie look super sick. It's not that it was even super effective online as an approach. That's why the best players, Kogu, Delpan, Markov, didn't used to use that super long range. They only used the no-scope at close range as a last resort weapon, but then it was accurate. So if you were incredibly good, you then still could use your skill to win the game. And sometimes people do it at mid-range, in which case we want them to be rewarded for this, if they're that good. Now, the key thing is, like I say, it wouldn't make everyone good at no-scoping. It wouldn't make everyone hit them. What would happen is it would reward aiming, like which is what you want, right? It would make people like Kenny S, Guardian, Skadoodle, JDM, go through the list of people you want. Simple, Fallen. It would make these guys have another way to separate themselves from the other good AWPers. You would see the difference between Fallen and Kenny S versus Chris J. You would see the difference between Skadoodle and JDM and Cadian. You would see the difference when these guys are all AWPing if they really were that good in this area as well. It's another way to separate themselves. It's another way to make themselves more dangerous as an AWPer. I also think, as an obvious reason, it allows for more legit AWP highlights, but more proper AWP highlights also. They rush you down, you go to the no-scope, you hit one of those, you hit 2 if you're really incredible. Now, there's an added element danger to just bum rushing down the AWPer who's super sick and getting to a medium range even from long range. So now there's a mind game involved in that. There isn't really, because the terrorists are still going to do it. They're just going to have to try and hit the shot. But if they accurately hit the shot, you got to tip your hat. They get the kill, right? Now, the AWP is already crippled enough from all the nerfs and all the problems in CSGO. Like, the movement nerf means that in that scenario, you can't just be zoomed in and then peek out and do the super sick peek, which I thought was fantastic and was one of the best elements of AWPing in the game. That was nerfed, so the gun got less useful in that sense. Then you're in a world where the price is incredibly expensive in a game where there are so many weapons that are cheap and viable that can be used and even obviously more worth the money in that sense, even though this is one shot, one kill. The kill reward is dog shit for this game. $100, that's ridiculous. You're never going to make the money back from it in that sense. You have to keep it alive and you have to keep winning rounds with it. strength of the pistols across the board, but all those really cheap pistols, $300, $350, $500, these pistols are way too strong comparative to an AWP. And that's also making the AWP not as good. Also, these pistols can now bomb rush you down if you don't have super accurate AWP or no-scoping. Force spies, as a result, are super strong because it's so weak. So I think adding in this element would give the AWPer back something without making the weapon overpowered. It hasn't even changed the price, hasn't even changed the kill reward. Just gives the AWPer a little something extra if he has the skill to now be able to deal with some of this stuff and to have a chance. And also to keep some AWPs alive so that we don't have economies ruined as they are all the time now by people buying AWPs. When they should be able to buy them, normal economy should allow it, but CSGO punishes you because of these OP pistols and the fact that people are moving while shooting, etc. All these sorts of problems. So I think bring back no-scope accuracy. I think it's good in all respects. Rewards extremely high-level skill. There won't be low-level players using it. It's the same as that AWP nerf. That didn't affect the lower-level players. It just fucked with the pro scene. It'll make for great highlights. It'll add an element of versatility to how good an AWPer is so they can separate themselves. It's skill reward again. It balances out some of the problems that the AWPs had with nerfs and problems in CSGO that didn't exist in other games. And it's not like you'll see people doing it a lot anyway. So I think it'll be very good for the pro level of the game.